G'day, this is Captainoob and welcome to Vegas, but not the Vegas in the Game Bureau engine. We're playing New Vegas in the Creation engine. See, I brought all my angels. Here we are, we're in Vegas. Told you I'd take you there someday. It's not exactly the universe we want to be here because we've got no Legion to slaughter, but also everyone stay away from Gamora. I don't want you to be around that, alright? Yes, we're in New Vegas. This is part of the new mod called Project Mojave. This mod is currently in early access, and most of the stuff hasn't been finished yet, but that isn't going to stop me from having a look at the weapons and seeing what kind of things we can get out of this. And oh, look at the Lucky 38. Look at this. This is brilliant. The strip. Oh my goodness. Look at this place. This makes me even more hyped for Fallout 4 New Vegas when that eventually comes out, because this is going to be so good. Anyway, so what I'm going to be doing in this video is giving you a quick overview of the weapons, giving my comments, and, you know, just to see what exactly we're going to be getting soon. I'm excited, so let's go ahead and see what's what. Okay, so here we are in the shooting range, and the first weapon from the draw is a 12.7mm pistol. If you looking at this thing and you're from Fallout 76 and you're thinking, hey, looks like a Crusader pistol. Yeah, they're basically the same design. They've got the slide there. The ammunition is reloaded here, though, at the bottom, so it's a big grip, 12.7mm. Although the standard receiver only doing 36 damage, which seems a little bit low for what it is, but when you equip this thing in first person, everything, you hold it with one hand, just like you would back in good old New Vegas. But if you aim down sights, your second hand comes out. I don't know what you're doing with that other second hand whilst you're aiming it without aiming down sights, or just holding it. But when you fire this thing, sounds like a 10mm pistol, reloads like a 10mm pistol. There's that hand again. I don't know, maybe I'm just putting it on my hip or somewhere else. It's pretty much it. When you sprint, the animation looks like that, and you bash it, the animation looks like that. Now, funnily enough, you can actually make this thing automatic. If we go down here to the powerful auto receiver, we get 45 damage, but we increase the fire rate. Probably not the best thing to do with this thing because, well, it just doesn't have a lot of rounds in it. Even with the big old magazine, you only get 14. You're going to be belting through those very quickly using the automatic things. You also chuck a reflex sight on it, a suppressor, or a bayonet if you feel like using this thing at close quarters. One thing to note about this thing, though, it's got a ton of range. That is so much range. It's also got a legendary slot, but not used on a standard 12.7mm pistol variant. That's kind of it. It's kind of basic, but that's all you can really do with a 12.7mm. Okay, so the next weapon is going to be a 10mm pistol, but a classic 10mm pistol. So this is what they look like back in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, if you cast your minds back. Personally, I think they look a lot better in Fallout 4, just because the poly count and less bulky and deagle looking. But if you want to make them look bulky, I feel like the more angular designs just suit the world a little bit better. This thing is automatic, so you can make these automatic just like you can with the 10 mils in Fallout 4 and would go on to be 76. And as you can tell from the sprinting animations, it's just an automatic variant of the animations we were using before. Taking this over to a workbench, you can see that we've basically got the same mods as you'd have on a standard 10mm. It's even got 93 damage with an advanced receiver, which is slightly better. And the magazine actually pops out when you modify it. And these things like reflex sights, a bit of glow sight stuff, they all exist. You can attach a suppressor, you can attach a laser sight, like back in the day in Fallout New Vegas, you could get a mod that actually does that. Unfortunately, that does take over the muzzle slot, so unfortunately you can't use a laser sight and a suppressor at the same time, and you can give it a little bit of a tint if you want. You can make it pre-war, and you can even make it weathered like the thing you'd get out of Courier's stash. Legendary effect is there if you want it. Generally, that is there because I've got the mod that allows you to modify them. But, you know, if you're using this thing without it, then that wouldn't show up. Okay, next weapon is something old, yet something new. And to give you a clue of what this is before I even equip it, you'll note that I've got a gigantic gas tank on my back. This is a flamer, like they used to make them, because they used to have these giant tanks on your back. The Gatling lasers and the miniguns used to have these too, except not exactly the giant tanks, but yeah, they exist in the mod, and we'll get to that in a second. But this is what the old flamers used to look like, and they had funky reload animations too. And you'll see that I'm pressing a button on top of the grip to actually make the thing fire, which is funny because you can make your thumb teleport if you want. And the reload animation is as such. And that's kind of how it was back in 3 in New Vegas as well. You just like release a valve and I guess fill up the rest of the thing with gas again or whatever. It's kind of weird how that works out. We'll hop back over this if I can and see what we can do on the workbench. So you can have a standard tank or a napalm tank to increase the damage a little bit. You can extend the barrel out a bit for increased reach. That's a good idea. Increase the ammo capacity in exchange for the weapon's weight, and the nozzles you can change them like you could with the standard flamer. Whether that actually changes the model, it doesn't look like it does, but it changes that. It looks like it's using the same flame stream from the regular flame, which has like the 3 barrel prongs of the vaporization nozzle there. I'm guessing it might even have the bug that, yeah, it carries the bug along with it, so that's funny. Very much like the Flamer, this next one also has a backpack, and anyone who would have played the older Fallout 3 generation of Fallout games would know exactly what this is. It's a Gatling Laser, but not the Gatling Lasers who know it. These things didn't have barrel spin up back in the day, or rather they had very little, and that's kind of actually reflected here. Just burst firing this thing to actually show you that, yep, this thing doesn't have any barrel spin up, which is great. That was one of the things that kind of annoyed me about the newer generation of Gatling lasers, but now we don't have to worry about that. The reload animation is kind of basic, and it kind of follows what you did back in the day. And you also notice how I've got a fusion cell plugged into the side of this rather than a fusion core. So since these things were originally loaded with electron charge packs, the ECPs, they've just replaced them with fusion cells because there was no other battery type weapon than that. And you'll see that with a lot of these weapons going forward, but the Gatling laser back kind of informed where it was. And whether this is a Gatling laser that exists separate from the Gatling laser that we see in 4 and 76, I don't actually know. This one, unfortunately, doesn't have anything except a legendary slot, so if you don't have the legendary modifier mods, you will not be able to modify this weapon at all. Next weapon is a little bit more on the futuristic side as well. I guess less futuristic than energy weapons, but it's a thing. It's the Blade Runner gun. It's a revolver thing. There's no hammer you have to pull back after every shot, so you can fire it very fast indeed. It's fairly unremarkable, although you'll see that after you reload this thing and you'll empty it, the little beam will be red, or the little light on the side, it'll turn green. Unfortunately, it's just the standard 44 animations, and it's not like automated like it was, because back in Fallout New Vegas, when this thing was around, the cylinder would sort of pop out by itself. You'd just load a moon clip in there and then it'll fold back in on its own. But now it's all sort of manually done. It's also got a thing here called the receiver. You can modify it to be automatic, which is kind of funky. It reduces the range to 0, which means the range will be infinite, because that's how the game works. But you can get up to 156 damage, and the auto just at 111, which I guess is a Fallout 4 reference to the game we're playing. And when you make revolvers automatic, you'll do this unused animation that was in Fallout 4 since the very start, but you'll smash a hammer down. The only problem is there's no hammer there. And the recoil kind of makes it a little bit of a pain in the ass to do that, but it's an option. It's interesting. Okay, so the next weapon was absent from Fallout 4, but eventually made a triumphant return into Fallout 76. This is a Plasmacaster. Yep, it's closer to what we'd expect from a Fallout 1 variant because of just simply how it looks, a little less streamlined, a little more bulky, although I like to note that this thing being all by itself there, not having to use a pack despite being a giant gun, is also a kind of a neat touch there. You'll see that the reload animation is basically the same as a Gatling laser, and it's got a little fusion cell sticking out the side, so unlike the 76 variant of this weapon, it is not using the plasma cartridges. You can fire it pretty rapidly, but I've found that the spread, it's not going to be that much of an issue from here, is going to be pretty high. As you can tell, I'm just firing this thing as fast as I can. None of those shots really hit exactly to the point where I was actually aiming. it's hard to show you when my bullets are hitting that. So we'll aim for center mass of this fellow, and most of the bullets are hitting, but over range, this thing is going to cost you a lot of accuracy. Couple that with the slower moving projectiles, you're going to have a weapon that's only going to be super usable at close range. No modifications will be attached to this, but, you know, pre-alpha, early access, yada, 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 that's to be expected. So the next weapon was sort of done away with when they overhauled the graphics in preparation for Fallout 4. This is a plasma pistol, like you would see the Enclave people in Fallout 3 have, and then they brought the thing back in New Vegas because, you know, they needed to flip some assets to save time. It's a pretty cool weapon. It's a lot less bulky than the standard plasma pistol. There's not really that much going on other than this reload, which, interestingly enough, kind of suits what this thing does. Although, if you look at this thing very closely in this thing, you'll note that these things look like the old school energy cells that used to load this thing in. But it is still loaded with standard fusion cells, so they've obviously streamlined this but kept the look of this thing using the much sleeker looking energy cells to power it, which I think is good enough. I like it. And if you take this thing over to a workbench, also, I should probably mention the elephant in the room, there's textures on this, they're not quite ready yet. They'll be added maybe during hotfix or maybe later during development. So if you see anything super purple like that, that just means they've messed up the either materials or just don't have it assigned yet. Anyways, so there's a lot of stuff going on here. None of this stuff you can actually modify yet, but you can make the beams purple. They're not beams, though. I'm call them plasma blobs. That's a scientific term. But it actually changes the lights on this thing to be purple. And you're firing Dark Eco from Jak and Daxter at things now. That's kind of cool. Okay, the next one is going to be a classic. Who doesn't love a good old Gauss rifle? Now, this is what it would look like before Bethesda brought it back with the Creation Club and made it a little bit different. And honestly, this thing looked like it's ripped straight out. It looks spot on, but you can tell that there's a little bit more polys in this. This thing looks a ton better. Basically, the old ways the Gauss rifles used to work, you got a fusion cell loaded in the side, which I must stress is loaded with fusion cells. So I guess that means that this gigantic magazine here is just filled with a bunch of those 2mm cartridges, and you're just using the fusion cells to power this thing. Interestingly enough, you only use 1 rather than the 4 that New Vegas would eventually go on to use. Maybe they'll implement that later, but yeah, we're getting a 1-to-1 ratio of shots versus things. And you'll note that this thing sounds exactly like the Gauss rifles do in Fallout 4 and would go on to be 76. And the animations for the reload look alright. It's a little bit slower than the assault rifle animations, so it makes it feel slightly balanced. In fact, they're a little bit sped up by my use of the rapid reload perk. But going over the attachments here, you can increase the range by shielding the barrel, and you can add a long scope if you want to scope things out from a little bit further away, and that's kind of it. You'll note that this thing mostly deals in energy damage though, which is strange because it's been well established that these things fire ballistic projectiles and most of their damage would come from a kinetic sort of energy, not heat energy like a laser gun would use. Also, it does a lot less damage than you'd get out of a vanilla Gauss rifle, and I think a theme of these weapons is none of them have been particularly well balanced yet. They've just been implemented. If you were to use these things within the little early access quest mod, you'd be fine. None of those things are tanky or overpowered anyway, and you'd be fine just using these things. But if you're bringing them back into the base game, if you're playing on a lower difficulty, you won't have a problem. But if you're playing on bullet sponge difficulties like I do, you'll find they fall behind fairly quickly. Now for something that was sorely missed in the newer types of Fallout's grenade launchers. This is a 25mm grenade launcher with a magazine. Right now it's loaded with timed rounds, so you can bounce them around corners and stuff. There's a little bit of a tactical advantage to having that thing, and having the 3-round magazine means you reload this thing fairly quickly and can get grenades out there very fast. You'll note that this thing has combat rifle animations, and your hand is sort of clipping through the grip. I suppose this is just a work in progress type thing, but that's what it looks like. We'll probably just take it over to a workbench because there's a little bit more grenades than just the one that I'm using now. So if we use this, we can change the barrel to a standard barrel to increase the range. We can use a full Kevlar stock to make this stock wrapped with Kevlar, just in case you're worried about the stock being shot with bullets. You protect the stock a little bit. You can also increase the magazine size. Interestingly, yeah, it's a small magazine. Shouldn't that be the standard and that should be extended? I feel like that would be the way to do it. And, okay, well, there is extra grenades, but you can't actually equip them yet. That's funny, because there's pulse and I believe plasma grenades you can utilize here, but apparently not. See, I've got them in my inventory. There's some plasmas, there's some pulse, and there were the timed ones that we were using. Okay, so the next weapon has sort of been in a constant state of flux and evolution from Fallout 3. Enter the classic hunting rifle. So, you'll note about this thing, first of all, that the bolt is on the right side. That is to say, on the correct side. And the animations for charging the bolt have been changed accordingly. I've got some Battlefield 1 animations here. That's why it looks a bit funky when transitioning from the bolt recycling animations and everything. But it all works really well. So they would have used the animations for the hunting rifle for mostly everything except for the cycling of the bolt, which is nice. And I like to point out this thing looks a lot less clean than what you get out of the standard Fallout 4 hunting rifles. So for a wasteland scavenger type deal, I feel like this works quite a lot better. And that doesn't stop there, because we can take this thing to a workbench and improve it quite a lot. We can even chamber it in 50 caliber, which I don't think this old girl can handle that much, but we can change the barrel to be longer. We can make it a well-maintained stock, which is, because the full stock has a screw, it's a little bit out. Let's just make it the maintained stock, looks a little bit more comfortable, and we can increase the magazine size, and you can also chuck a scope on it if you want. Normally you'd be stuck with the glow sights back in New Vegas, so we'll just use it like that. But it is nice to be able to chuck a scope on these things, whether it be long, medium, or short, or a night vision variant of those. You can chuck a suppressor on these as well, so it's getting better and better, I tell ya. And you can change the material of the metal bits, so you can make it gold too. Oh, isn't that nice? A lot of love has been put into this hunting rifle here, and I think it's one of the more complete weapons. Just ignore that I've got over 100,000 or so 50 cal bits. Now, if I fire this thing, it's got a big, beefy 50 cal sound. Don't have to worry about weapon condition here, baby. You'll be right. Okay, so the next one is kind of like a reskin of a Far Harbor weapon. This is a trail carbine. It's one of those sort of mid to late game type weapons in New Vegas that I generally associate with the Legion hit squads, because that's how you get them. You just piss off the Legion and dudes with trail carbines will be hunting you down in no time. But as you can tell, this thing, it's got an 8-round magazine, and it's kind of funky with its animation sometimes. You sort of zoom in a little bit after you fire it. I guess that's the recoil. But when we reload this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're bound to the silly old bug where you need to reload this thing and do the entire reload animation over, even when you've only fired one from the chamber, which is kind of funky, but there's been mods to sort of get around that and to fix that, which I'm sure will be implemented in time when this thing is going to be updated. So we'll increase the damage with the advanced receiver there. Nothing can be done with the sights or the muzzle, but I think in New Vegas you could chuck a scope on this, and if this is anything like the hunting rifle, maybe we could utilize something like a compensator, even though nobody uses those. More importantly, a suppressor. That'd be great. You can get them on the lever guns from Far Harbor, so why not? And I think that kind of covers everything with the trail carbine. Silly, silly thing. Okay, let's do a quick fire round of some unique weapons. So, the unique flamer, cleansing flame. That's what it looks like. That's what it fires like. No pun intended. See, there it is. Slightly better damage and yada yada yada. This is Little Devil. It's got a significantly increased damage. That's the legendary effect here. You can see it right there. It's the unique variant of the 12.7mm pistol. You can tell it's a bit shorter. Back in New Vegas, you could use this as a holdout weapon, which is an extremely powerful weapon to have during a casino battle, because none of your enemies will be dressed in anything but suits, which have no damage threshold. So hopefully, when they get around to perfecting the holdout weapon system in the casinos in Project Mojave, you could take this with you into a casino if you wanted. Here's Sprtel-Wood 9700, that one. It's got green laser beams, green barrels, fires, does damage, reloads like that. Basically the same thing. This is a Synth Hunter's 5.56mm pistol. something we've already kind of seen before, and managed to two-fang it there. That's kind of interesting. Nothing too much going on here. Here's that gun. It's the same thing. A little bit better damage, maybe. Not too much different happening here. Smitty Special. Not automatic, unfortunately, but it does look a little bit different. You'll note that the stabilizer fin thingies, they're a bit different. I swear that it's faster, because, you know, it's like a turbo plasma rifle, and it's slightly different looking towards the start of the barrel there with those glowing tubes. Look at that guy. He's just... Alright, the recoil makes it look funky in third person. Here's Volair. I don't even know if this thing exists in actual New Vegas. I'm fairly certain that it was one of the quests for the boomers, was it not? One of the more, I guess, iconic weapons is YCS. This is the unique Gauss rifle that if you installed or activated the trait called Wild Wasteland, it'd get replaced by Space Allens, which was not a good idea. It's just stronger. Slightly more efficient on cells. It's got a lot more coils. That's why it was stronger, because it could accelerate the coils, the projectile faster. It's a bit red this time. And that's it for the range stuff. Just realized I forgot Passiencio. So this is a unique hunting rifle originally offered in the game by the Gunrunner's Arsenal expansion. And basically it's just a hunting rifle with a Mexican flag wrapped around the stock. In Fallout New Vegas, you had bonus crit chance and crit damage, as well as extra damage. This just has the lucky prefix on it, referred to here as Passiencio, interestingly enough, just in case the devs forgot. Gives a little bit more power. You'll also notice how it's got all the attachment slots, which means you can chamber this in 50 cal, suppress it, and put a giant scope and a magazine and everything on it as well. So that's good. Okay, so let's quickly go over some of the explosives you get in this. So you can get these floater gas grenades, which will do a little bit of damage, and they'll explode at a kind of like a ball of gas. It's kind of weird, actually. Not really sure what the purpose of these things are, but there are floaters inside the Mojave somewhere. You could go find them. I'm not going to tell you where they are, but supposing their sacks that they leave behind will help you craft these things. That's kind of it with them. This one's called a fat mine. Think of it as like a frag mine, but instead of exploding like, say, a frag mine, it explodes like a fat man. So what you'll find is that you'll shoot him and you'll get a giant mushroom cloud. And as you can tell, these things don't mess around with damage. So even in here, you might want to just stand back a little bit, because they can do a ton of damage to you, but to everyone else as well. If you've got a proper build there, I've actually hurt myself there, because even now it was way too far. But more importantly, here's a detonator, and that goes together with C4 explosives. So if we equip the detonator and the C4 explosive, which goes in on our slot of the explosive variety, you can place C4 charges, which don't actually have any explosions until you manually trigger them. So I'm going to press the trigger now. Kabooms! Unfortunately, these weren't added to Fallout 4 in any way other than with mods, and it's actually a really cool functionality. Just have an explosion to happen whenever and wherever you want it, and you can really actually put it wherever you want it if you've got the sticky variant, which you can stick it to people, to things, to walls, so you can put it pretty much everywhere. You can put it right there if you want. For some reason, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. In fact, it only does one, according to this. It looks like a Vault-Tec lunchbox. Maybe that's what it looks like. But yeah, it's a really cool utility, and hopefully we might see more of this in future Fallout games, eh? I don't think it'll work in Fallout 76, so too much griefing could go about it. And now let's do a quick fire round of the melee weapons. This is a 9-iron. It's used the two-handed animations, which means it's going to be a slow animation, and it won't do a whole lot of damage compared to basically anything. 183, not that much. Next one is a baseball bat. It does 194 damage, and it's slightly faster because the baseball bat animations are faster than the super sledge animations. And then we've got a cattle prod, which uses the medium, which is just the standard one-handed attack speed, slightly faster. Next up, we've got a chainsaw, which uses the animations from the Automatron Mr. Handy Buzzblade. You hold it out in front of you, and you start chopping. That's actually pretty useful. At 129 damage, swinging that fast, I feel like that's probably one of the more powerful things we'll see from this collection. We've got a dress cane here, courtesy of the Ultra-Luxe. That's where you get this one from. Whoops, spoilers. And then you've got Embrace of the Mantis King, which is a Mantis Gauntlet, but unique. It gives it slightly more damage. Not much going on with that. The functionality is basically the same as a Deathclaw Gauntlet. There's Gehenna. It's the unique version of the Shish Kebab, which has purple flames on it, which I'm not sure if that's a bug or if it's intentional, but I think it's a Mace Windu type Shish Kebab here. You also note how I get the motorcycle gas tank on the back too, just like you would back in classic Fallout, or not classic Fallout, old school 3D Fallout. We've got Grease Lightning here, which is a power fist, but punches real fast like, which is cool because up until this point we haven't had much in the way of swing speed increasing type of weapons. This thing does reduce the damage a little bit, so it's doing 161, but it is still a very fast weapon. We've got a katana, much like the katana from the Gunrunner's Arsenal expansion in New Vegas. It is a one-handed weapon, so basically the same animations as you saw before with the cattle prod. We've got a knife. This is the combat knife animations. So stabby, a little bit faster for less damage and power attacks like that. There's not really that much to go on. It's just a reskinned combat knife. This is another Mantis Gauntlet. We've seen that. This is Nuka Breaker. It's, I think someone saw the live action fan series someone made. There was some guy, he drank Nuka-Cola and he got healing powers from it. And he walked around with this. It's been ages since I saw it. Kind of wish I'd forgotten it. But here we are. This is a power fist, so this is the standard power fist sort of animations attached to this thing. So it's looking like normal speed. You also note that there's no actual like glove for the front of the power fist here. This is just the standard gloves that I've got with the Secret Service outfit, which is interesting. I've got a Saturnite fist and a Saturnite fist which is superheated, which glows a little bit. This is from the Old World Blues DLC expansion originally, but they've been brought back here because I guess they made that much of an impression. They're basically the same weapon, slightly different stats. This one that is superheated would go significantly worse because not only is it less damage than the standard one, but it's energy damage, so it's not going to hit nearly as hard. But I have to say that its glowing is especially aesthetically pleasing. And unfortunately, you don't leave burn marks when you punch things with this at all. It's just the standard bullet marks, which is fairly disappointing, but maybe they could get around to fixing that. And this is just the standard shish kebab right here. Do I get an oven mitt whilst using this? I do as well. Look at that. That's some attention to detail. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Wonder if that's actually attached to the weapon. I feel like it ought to be, because like maybe. Well, I suppose the game's already given you a motorcycle gas tank on your back. I guess it's not super far-fetched that even now, I guess that answers the question of whether this thing's attached to your hand or anything. But yeah, you get a mitt with it. Now, we'll quickly go over the upgrades here because there's not that much stuff going on. Starting off from the top, the 9 iron, no upgrades. Baseball bat, you get the same as what you get out of the baseball bat from this game, which means you could get up to incredibly powerful damages if you're using the shocking puncturing rocket from the Nuka World DLC. You've also got some cattle prods, you can give it spikes, and you can give it electrified copper and a heated coil to increase the damage even more. This is surprisingly a powerful weapon if you want to upgrade it with everything you possibly can. That ain't nothing right there. That'll do very well, especially since if you're using it with stealth, you can get yourself a 12 times multiplier. This is a chainsaw. We can increase the carbide teeth, which is one of the things you could do back in New Vegas, part of the Gunrunner's Arsenal thing, I think. And an alloy frame reduces the weight from 20 to 12. Very, very nice indeed. And this dress cane, Ultra-Luxe, basically the same things as you get out of the walking cane in this game. Nothing really special in terms of damage, but we'll move on from that. Katana, you could increase the damage with an authentic blade, which I guess would be worse than a knockoff blade because Japanese steel was never that good anyway, but what have you. And you can change the grip. Authentic red, red grip, or just standard material, which means it's blue. I think the best grip would be that one. That's my favorite. And you can't really do much with the Mantis gauntlet here. I should probably mention, these are from Honest Hearts, I reckon. That's where they originally came from. The White Legs used to use them and stuff. Now, you can attach extra flame jets onto your shish kebab, which suggests that they're just using the standard shish kebab in part mostly, because originally the blade of the shish kebab in Fallout 4 sort of curved back, and these extra flame jets would follow the curvature of the blade, but not in this case. Also, I guess we're relying mostly on the flaming damage to get this thing going, because that blade looks blunt as hell. Interesting. So, the Power Fists, can't do much with them, so we'll rule all of those out. Nuke Breaker, you can't do anything. The Knife, you can equip with the standard stuff you get out of the combat knives in Fallout 4, so the Stealth Blade and the Blade of the Serrated variety, and I think that pretty much covers it. There's not much else going on here, although I want to reverse engineer this so I can make my own swing speed. Gloves or punching gloves. Well, it's an industrial gauntlet. No, this is just a Power Fist back in the day. See, I'm getting confused here, but notice how there's a bunch of little tally marks there. Someone's been doing a lot of killing with this. And, yep, that pretty much covers it. An overview of all the weapons. Maybe we'll review these a little bit further on as time goes by, because I feel like if I'm using them in very high difficulty, we won't really stand that much of a chance against any of these toughened gunners now, will we? Thank you very much for watching, guys.